Times Influence Initiative.
Hello and welcome to the 4th edition of Times Network's India Economic Conclave, presented by Capital First, Partner in Progress, Gabon Special Economic Zone, and powered by Raven. The inaugural episode last week featured excerpts from an engaging session with the Defence Minister Nirmala Sitharaman and two well-known economists, Dr. Arvind Subramanian and Professor Nouriel Roubini.
I think it is this government which has the courage to face up to such situations which have been lying under the carpet for a very long time. The moment we got to know that something was going wrong, action was initiated.
Rise in oil prices create problems. It might lead to a rise in headline and core inflation. It worsens the trade balance. It worsens the fiscal balance. It might force the central bank to tighten more rather than ease more.
Next up, Times Now's Navika Kumar is in conversation with Emmanuel Isoze Gonde, the Prime Minister of Gabon, a country that abounds in natural resources such as petroleum and timber. Are you wondering why one of the most prosperous countries in sub-Saharan Africa is betting big on India? And what's in it for India Inc. to invest in Gabon? Let's find out.
I would like to talk about the numerous investment opportunities that Gabon has to offer to India. During his last visit to India for the first official summit of the International Solar Alliance, a few days ago, our head of state, His Excellency Ali Bongo Ondimba, addressed this matter with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, to whom he presented a certain numbers of concrete projects. Therefore, I am heading a large delegation including ministers and experts. As I have said, different ministers accompany me: the Minister of Forest, the Ministers of Economy, the Minister of Agriculture, and the Minister of Investment. That alone shows the high consideration, the high importance that we attach to our partnership with India. Our aim, following the recent visit of Mr. President, is to find way and means to strengthen this partnership to reflect the evolution of the India-Africa partnership. We take a positive view on the India-African partnership. As a matter of fact, India's economic presence in Africa has grown steadily in the past years. The arrival of Indian companies will obviously help Gabon to achieve his ambition to position itself as the gateway to the Central African market, which represent 145 million consumers. Gabon aims to be a strategic destination for Indian private investors. I therefore invite every single economic operator present in this room to come to Gabon. Thank you for your attention.
Your president, Ondimba Bongo, was in India recently, in fact, just a few weeks ago, as part of the International Solar Alliance. And he did meet with our Prime Minister, Narendra Modi. How are you looking at India and Gabon relations going forward in the strategic partnership area?
As you said, the President, Ali Bongo Ondimba, was here to attend to the first summit of Solar International Alliance. This is a proof that the bilateral relations between Gabon and India are going smoothly and very positively. What could I say? That historically our two countries have enjoyed very good relations. In international arena, we shared views on topics, issues concerning the world, but on bilateral arena also we exchanged so many positive bilateral visits of our several ministers came to India in view to promote the economic cooperation opportunities. And now we are working very hard to focus on looking to sign very attractive agreement in view to attract more investors in Gabon. So what could I say? That Gabon and India are improving their bilateral relation in political, diplomatic, and economic area.
This is a room full of people who are from the corporate world, from the business world. What would you like to tell them about Gabon to increase partnership between Gabon and India and to invite investment from India into Gabon?
Of course, we are engaged in a very intensive developing program in Gabon. So the increase of the economic influence of India in the world could be a very positive opportunity for Gabon to raise its level of development. And when we saw the figures of the bilateral trade and also the possibility for Gabon to attract investment, private investor from India in Gabon, of course we do believe, and this is the view of my government and the view of the President Ali Bongo Ondimba, we do believe Gabon, India becoming a powerhouse in the economic area will be a very important partner for Gabon.
Well, there is a lot of benefit that you can offer Indian investors, given the fact that you are a country that's rich in oil and natural gas, and that is something that constitutes nearly 67% of Indian imports. In that area, do you see a partnership with India in a long-term agreement where India can have access to oil and natural gas and products that can be manufactured in your country and exported to India?
Of course, yes. Oil is the main important sector of Gabon economy. But since 2 decades, Gabon is engaged to diversify its economy, but the future of the oil sector is still lying in front of Gabon, in front of our future. So this sector is open to every operator who want to invest in Gabon. But working to attract more investors, Indian investors in the oil sector, is not mean that we could close the other sectors to Indian operators. We are diversifying our economy. Oil sector is offering some very important, substantial opportunities, business opportunities to Indian operator, but we have also 8 more active sectors in our economic plan. Agriculture is one of them, infrastructure, electricity, tourism, wood, because we know that Indian economy needs very quality of wood, and Gabon could offer these products to Indian investors. We have so many areas in which we could build a strong partnership, and that's why I came here with the Gabonese minister and some experts to work on these issues.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister Emmanuel Issoze. Thank you very much for joining us here on this platform.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's time now for a short break, but coming up on the other side is an insightful session between Railways and Coal Minister Piyush Goyal and ICICI Bank's MD and CEO Chanda Kochhar. Stay tuned.
We have actually seen a transformational change in the way the nation collectively plans for the future.
Everybody started implementing projects before the projects were fully structured. And I think that is going to change, not just from the banking sector, but from the entire investment point of view.
Welcome back to Times Network's India Economic Conclave, presented by Capital First, Partner in Progress, Gabon Special Economic Zone, and powered by Raven. The government in the last few years has consciously worked to boost infrastructure, but the legacy of stalled projects has left India Inc. with over-leveraged balance sheets and banks with mounting NPAs. So how can we reimagine India's infrastructural needs? Two people who are working hard to make that possible are the very agile Railways and Coal Minister Piyush Goyal and the head of one of India's largest private banks, ICICI Bank's MD and CEO Chanda Kochar. ET Now's Supriya Srinate is in an interesting conversation with both of them.
Minister Goyal, if I may start with you, Rise with India is the theme of this conclave. Rise with India is a theme that we at ET Now follow. Big believers in the India story. But can Rise with India be possible without the infra deficit being bridged? And if I may just also add, the government has taken care of concerns that were in roads, railways, ports, all of that. We need $1.5 trillion over the next 10 years to do so. How are we going to execute that?
I've been in government now nearly 4 years, and I've come to the conclusion that there is absolutely no problem of funds when you do a project right, when you do a project honestly, or any plan honestly, and when one can easily work out what the future holds as an outcome for what you're investing in. In my earlier stint in the power or coal sector and now in the railway sector, I believe one can very easily work out projects which are economically viable. They give you a good cost-benefit ratio. And for any project which makes good sense, whether it's for customer satisfaction, whether it's for capacity enhancement, whether it's for efficiency in operation, I believe one can easily work out a business case which justifies investments. And to date, in 4 years, not a single project I have found money to be a deterrent. If at all there has been a deterrent, it's been our ability to think big. If at all it's been a deterrent, it's been the mindset change that we as a nation need to, all of us, get into our way of working, our way of imagining, our way of execution. And to my mind, these 4 years, we have actually seen a transformational change in the way the nation collectively plans for the future.
Indeed. But before I go to Ms. Kochar, I'll ask you a quick follow-up there. The government is obviously spending in infrastructure because the public sector investment of growth is the one that's revving. You want to let the public sector channel of investment crowd in the private investments. That hasn't happened. How long do you see the public sector begin investing, and what will incentivize the private sector to begin lose their purse strings?
Well, I have been making some assessments of the India growth story over the last 15, 20 years. And one stark reality that comes out is the large amounts of capacities that were created in the 2007-8 to 2014 period. Very often capacities created on the back of very liberal cash flows being available, very liberal bank credit being available, possibly also the rush to meet targets and achieve larger and larger balance sheets. And during that period, I think on the back of government loosening its purse strings, not necessarily in a prudent manner, but in a actually fiscally very imprudent manner. Things like letting the fiscal deficit slide up to 6% within the span of a year, literally double of what was projected in the budget of 2008. Now, those type of very, very short-term myopic decisions have cost the nation dear, have cost the banking sector dear. And that's an issue we have had to grapple with, but we've not shied away from that reality. We have recognized that reality. We have faced it up front.
Ms. Kochar, infra lending, and to bridge that infra deficit, Minister Goyal says there is no dearth of funds. Indian industries obviously burnt its fingers with overcapacities, projects being stalled. Is infra lending a very risky business to be in? And, you know, ICICI Bank has done infra lending. You're not someone who's followed the retail lending sort of a model. Do you believe that's a risky business to be in? And is that why banks are kind of shying away from lending to private infra players?
Well, at ICICI Bank, I think we've followed the mixed model. So we are also a big retail bank, along with, of course, funding infrastructure projects. I think on infra funding, there are two things as we see going forward that should happen. One is that in the past, all the infra funding almost has been done only by banks in India. And I think the change that has to come about is that we have to go beyond the banking sector, so we have to widen and deepen the sources of funding. The second is that even, banks' ways of funding infrastructure per se will undergo a certain amount of change as we go forward. So what do I mean by these two things? One is that, as banks were funding infrastructure in the past, it was always assumed that as projects will get set up, approvals will come by and by. Everybody started implementing projects before the projects were fully structured. And I think that is going to change, not just from the banking sector, but from the entire investment point of view. I think now, as we are talking of the new models, whether it's HAM and so on and so forth, we are saying land has to be available prior, right-of-way has to be clear, your backward-forward integrations have to be clear. So the projects will be much more structured and put in place before you start giving the bank funding. I think that's the change going forward in project finance. The second is that instead of only banks funding the projects and then keeping those loans on their balance sheets for the next 7 or 8 years, you will now find more and more sources of funding which will come and take on the bank's exposures. And if you see, a lot of that is happening now already. What should happen going forward is that as the projects start getting implemented, I think it would initially be banks who would still give the project loans, but the projects will be structured much better. Then, as the implementation is complete, then you will have all these other forms of funding who would come in, pay off the bank loans, and that will actually release banks' ability and exposure to fund the next round of investment.
Besides funding, I think a lot of credit goes to the government that you've got these alternate sources of funding that have been put. I mean, banks are no longer the only port of call. Do you believe at the heart of the infra deficit is the nature and how the rules of the game will have to change? It can no longer be infrastructure being built the way it was 10 years back.
I think it will be a mix of both. There are a number of infrastructure projects which have a social dimension. And after all, every government has to recognize a social requirement of a nation as large as India. Today we have 115 districts which haven't come up on the development cycle as fast as the rest of India has. We've now taken up a project to take these 115 aspirational districts, as the Honorable Prime Minister calls them, and try and address the aspirations of the people of these areas. We are not making them feel backward. We are giving them we're giving a voice to their aspiration. It's a need that the nation will have to address, and there you cannot look at the profit and loss of that particular department or that particular company. That there was a time when normally a person would say that if I have borrowed 5 crore, 10 crore from the bank, it's my liability to pay it back. But the moment I have borrowed 10 or 20,000 crores, it's the problem of the bank. It's no more my problem, it's the banker's problem to get it back somehow. That rule has finally changed in this country, and promoters, delinquent promoters, are required to liquidate assets. We have a robust insolvency code in place. We have a robust system which is now working. And actually, bankers are seeing the color of money which they had lent out.
As far as IBC is concerned and whether, the NPA cleanup is concerned, the criticism against is this, that banks don't have too much elbow room. It's left to resolution professionals and, people like that. Is this going to lead to a credit freeze? Are we seeing more and more banks, at least the public sector ones tell us off the record, we don't want to lend. You never know what we really end up with.
So first of all, Supriya, I think as far as IBC is concerned, I think that's one of the most important events that's happened in the country that has actually given the power of balance back in the hands of the banks. Because now it's really a worry for the promoters to say, let me not make a default, lest I will lose my company. And I think that's a very, very positive impact going forward. About solving the existing cases through IBC, again, I think the issue is that at least it puts a time-bound approach to solving it. Otherwise, one could go on and on and all. And when there is a time-bound approach, there is really a time-bound kind of, limit on the minds of the promoters also to say this way or that way, I have to make up my mind. The bankers to say this way or that way, I have to make up my mind, and time-bound decisions are arrived at. Second is, it gives a kind of a judicial cover to the decision. So I think from that point of view, it helps the bankers to decide. But yes, I think we are still going through that phase where every step of the IBC process is not yet fully tried out in the large cases, and therefore you will see that at every step there would be some cases. And I think in the initial times, it will be the court judgments that will finally actually make the law. So, you know, at every step, if one has to interpret the law, it's okay, let it go to the court, that will set the precedent. That will then make that the law for the next set of courses.
On that note, thanks very much for being a lovely audience, and thank you very much, Mr. Goel and Ms. Kochhar, for being with us.
And that's a wrap from this episode of the India Economic Conclave. We'll be back next week with some global leaders from the digital world taking center stage. Goodbye for now, and many thanks for watching.
I do think there's this theme out there that technology is maybe sometimes too disruptive.
Yes.
And I think you really have to take a step back and say, you know, you don't really want to slow that down.
The internet is entering a second era. For 40 years, we've had an internet of information. Now we're getting an internet of value.
A Times Influence Initiative.